Okay, it's 5:30, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. Are we recording?
Yes.
Okay, thank you,
You
Ann.
can sit closer to us.
Yeah, you could actually.
Come up to the table.
She wants to be incognito.
By us.
All right. So this is the work session for Minnetrista, June 17th, 2024. Present this evening, myself, Lisa Whalen, the mayor, and then council members present are Kathleen Refkin, Ann McGregor, Peter Vickery. And staff present, we have Allison Falsky, WSB engineer, and what's your last name again? Meyer. City clerk, and then Brian Grimm, finance director, and David Abel, community development director. The others are absent this evening. So we have a number of items. We're going to talk about budget levy considerations, park dedication fee, and swamp update. And if we have time, Kathleen and I will give you a quick update on our meeting with AE2S and regarding, and we'll explain the CRAM. So with that, handing over to Brian.
Yes, yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor and Council. So hopefully everyone had a chance to review, digest the council work session packet for the budget information. I tried to, I guess, summarize some items or hit some high points, and more just to generate discussion with the council as far as, you know, what things were sort of, I don't want to say locked into, but I guess sort of locked into or committed to as far as, you know, obviously union contracts, and some of those things are in place for the second year of a 3-year contract for all of those for 2025. And then things that more the council has discretion with as far as, I think, you know, listed, you know, roads or adding staff or those type of things is obviously generated, you know, through personnel committee via the council, or, you know, ultimately the council. And I tried to add just a few other, I guess, informational pages to sort of help with the discussion too. But maybe I'll just start with the memo, and just if anyone has any questions, I guess maybe ask as we're going.
Yeah,
through
we'll
it.
just
Chime
chime in. Yeah,
Pretty informal
right.
as far as
Yeah, exactly.
So, but yeah, I guess that first item down at the bottom of page 2, I guess is items. I guess I categorize as
Right.
you know, items the city's committed to. Obviously, compensation is one of the biggest one. You know, all cities, you know, all organizations deal with. Basically, just based on the union contracts, I think, are between like 3.5% and 5%, depending for the second year, depending between public works and police, and that's the sergeants, and I guess even or the
Right.
CSO unions. So when you look at that impact, it's roughly about 4% or 240,000 to the levy impact there. It's the other items are more related, I guess, to that insurance / benefits types items. I mean, general liability and workers' comp has been going up pretty substantially. The nice thing is we've had a really good experience modification, so that's kept that workers' comp from going up as much as it could have. I think our rating's like at a 0.75, which means we pay 3/4 of what our organization has regular or the average workplace incidents or injuries. So that's helped keep that down, but it's still increasing. The property liability, same there. Cafeteria plan, we'll probably talk about that more as we get into the budget, but the insurance, we'll get more information like in late June, July, as far as at least an initial estimated impact, what's happening in the health insurance industry or realm. So there's that, and then
I don't think there's a whole lot of wiggle room here unless you find out from the insurance company or whatever that it's not going to go up that much.
Correct.
So,
yeah. And then lastly, I just had the inflationary impacts there as far as just that's anything from fuel, utilities, etc. It just seems like, I know they say that it's trying to soften, but I know they've delayed doing any rate adjustments or decreases at even the Federal Reserve level, just because they still want inflation to come down. I know I even had that individually today. I had part of the day off to look at a vehicle and a vehicle cost, or actually made a purchase because it was getting too hard for 4 people to drive 3 vehicles in the family. So, but, I don't know, carpooling doesn't always work.
What rate did you get?
Oh, as far as, the financing of the vehicle, like, just under 4%, like 3.9
What'd you
for
get?
60, Equinox or Equinox?
Equinox?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
okay.
So, sorry to go on that little,
Okay.
but just even more as
Yeah.
an individual or personal example, that inflation is still,
It's painful.
costs are there. So ultimately, I guess at the top of page 3 there, if you look at a subtotal, it's probably
About
5.5,
6%,
6%, 350,000. So that's almost like a baseline as far as what we need to do. So, item 2, I think we obviously, at one of the last meetings we had, we have been using fund balance. I guess I'll start with that. And we've used about 193,000 this year as budgeted, and we'll see when the actual numbers come in. But the good item that we just adopted, what was it? Either at the last meeting or the one before that, was the Hennepin County taking on the assessing valuation services. So that is going to save us about 200,000 on the city-wide levy. So if we sort of just apply that there, we can sort of basically get back to a starting point of a balanced budget, or pretty much should be pretty structurally
Right.
balanced there.
And we do
So-
have to get to a balanced budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So that's a good thing. So it's sort of an offset or available that those expenses will come off for the tune of about 200,000, and that'll help plug that budget difference or whatever. So I know another item. I think there's the personnel committee meeting tomorrow, right? As far as that, and I think B there is depending on if there'd be any additional employees, added. Whether
What I was going to say here in this category is, we can't even hire the 15th officer. I'm not sure that we should be budgeting for a 16th officer. I mean, we're already halfway into the year and we still don't have a 15th officer. So, again, to try and kind of keep our levy increase, I would say don't budget for a 16th officer until 2026. Kind of.
I like that.
And then the public works, I think, maybe hiring a public works person. Obviously, we're going to hire somebody to replace Mike.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So that's not a part of this.
Yep.
And then I would assume whomever we're hiring isn't going to be making the same money as Mike was.
Well,
So
we've
we'll have-
already replaced Mike. I think
Right.
tomorrow at the personnel
Adam.
committee, we're talking about a supervisor position.
Okay.
That's, I'm assuming, where the budgeting for public works is coming from.
A little bit, and then whether I guess just to even have like a general discussion with council, if and obviously
Yeah, we can.
during the budget process, whether there would be the need to add another public works employee. Obviously, some of that would, what would be there. We've sort of added, to the water department and sewer and done some, I guess, more. Not making a whole department, but segmentation of those. So, but whether there's a need for, I guess, any other, additional employees in that area of public works, I guess that would be ultimately for Gary to present and personnel committee and the council
To work it out,
decide.
discuss it. Maybe,
Yeah.
but if you do, maybe it could be a midterm hire,
Yeah, correct.
versus at
So-
the beginning. That would
Yeah.
save
Yeah.
at least a 1% or something like that.
And I think, that's where I think, with, the 50 to 150, obviously the public works is probably a little more on the lower end, just based
Right.
on the salary range or
Exactly.
whatever, and the police would be more on the higher end, but I think.
But I'm
that's-
just thinking if somebody is added in public works, it would be an entry level or
Yeah, it would be on the low end.
Right.
That way.
Usually,
Yeah.
it just
Right.
depends sometimes on what type of experience. If it's someone that really has, 10, 15 years experience, and sometimes we've been doing the
Right.
lateral on grade 3, grade
Yeah.
4 or something, so. But, obviously, decisions, the council and things that, between both the personnel committee and I think even, let's see, Paul and Gary are here tonight. But
Right.
if they really feel strongly or something, they would have to make that
They
case. to
they
the
can make that
council.
case. I'm just saying, I mean, it just seems, we budgeted for a 15th officer, for this year, and we're not there yet, so I
There's-
I
yeah,
just,
there doesn't seem to be a point to budget for
Yeah.
another
Another.
16th in 2025, when we
Right.
likely won't have the 15th in 2025.
and then their next one, here's my take on the next,
Oh,
the
no,
financial
there, okay.
software. Okay, here's the thing.
Okay.
I think there's things that we need
Okay,
and then things that we want. And
Okay.
I think this is a want. And I think we should put this off We don't need it next year. I don't think we should put money aside for it next year. But maybe think about it in future years again, because we're looking at, 9, 10, 12% increase. So I think this is a want for right now.
Well,
That's my
the
take on
concern
it.
is when it becomes a need, like the cameras, and this way we'd have the money set aside to use for it.
So I don't know if this would qualify under an equipment certificate, but that might be something you could do with
It's
an
more
equipment
s-
certificate.
Yeah, it's more software related, so it might be a little bit of a grayish
Well-
area, yeah.
But then the other thing to consider is when we talk about the CIP, I think we should continue adding to that so that eventually, so you could take it out of the CIP budget too.
Potentially, but yeah, you'll probably see in August, there's some, there might be a big ticket, Paul will probably have a squad or two, and Gary, I think, had something, at least in his preliminary CIP for, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was, potentially a $200,000-300,000, one of the bigger pieces of equipment.
Right.
So that's the only, hard part is as far as, adding that to that, and what's the best way, and yeah, I think it's the reason.
I mean, eventually we really should, and we should have been doing this more so, but we need to wean ourselves off of equipment certificates unless the rates go down to 1% again or something like that. Then it makes sense. But when the rates are, 4 or 5%, you really don't want to be borrowing money.
Are we talking about the financial
Yes.
software?
Yeah.
Well, kind of.
Yeah.
It's kind of both.
Yeah, because it'd be
Okay.
funded usually through that.
I had a good conversation with Jasper today, a long one, on this, because I worked for a $1.6 billion company that did go through Oracle, and it was an absolute fabulous disaster that really hurt the company badly. And again, that was 2005. I don't understand why we need $300,000 worth of financial software. I'm not getting it.
So, basically, it'd be an all-encompassing system, so it'd be, our general ledger, our payroll, our utilities, and pretty much these conversions are usually 1 to 2 year processes, so it's, it's obviously the software, whether it's, most of them are subscription as a service now or whatever, but a lot of it comes into the setup, the training, the implementation of it, so the 300,000 might be a little on the higher end, but colleagues I've talked to that have gone through this process, and it's one of these things where I think it would be beneficial to do it, especially as the city grows. We're probably going to outgrow our Banyan software we have right now. I know it's a difficult transition, so in some ways it's like if the council says, no, I'm not going to be like too upset or whatever. But it is something we probably should look at. It'd be nice to probably have converted, whether it's by 2029 or 30 or sometime in the next 4 or 5 years. It might get to the point where it would just be better for both internal and external users to have a more sophisticated financial software. And it's just a matter of trying to set aside some money to, whether it's 50 or 75,000 for a few years. I think, minimally we probably need, to think, 175, 200,000, and it depends. Probably maybe the high end would be more like, 250, 300,000. So.
Okay, all right, well, and that makes some sense. Go ahead.
So what would be the advantages of, you must have some idea of the software you want. What does it do that the current software doesn't do?
Our current software is more access-based, so it's, some of the reports it generates for both even, just internal users for the departments as well as like what we can put online. Right now we're doing some things where you got to export to Excel to make things like look better and stuff, where obviously a lot of the better financial software have a lot,
More bells and whistles.
More bells and whistles. They can even do, like with the, it probably, might be able to do a little more with some of the utility stuff we do or whatever. But I think, some of that we've been able to integrate, with the, our Itron software as far as, more reads and things like that, So there is things that we're sort of doing that we can do, but at some point I think we're going to need to almost do like an overall finance conversion versus just sort of add on here, supplement there.
But here's where,
I was just going to say about the billing, from talking with Jasper, if we want to ever switch to the monthly water billing, we need better software.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to
So-
get. We've been able to do something.
But what I'm getting
Stop
at
using
is
so much water.
that right now, what are we levying for our CIP, 150,000?
Yes.
And if we add 50,000 every year to that, in very short order, we are going to have 300,000, 400,000 every year that we are levying for CIP, and you can use that money to buy the software. So and then if it happens to fall in a year where you need equipment for public works or police, then you can use an equipment certificate for that purchase. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm saying is I think we're kind of double levying for this. That's to me it's a CIP. It's a capital outlay. And why wouldn't we just use our CIP budget for that?
We could use some of like our existing cash, especially,
Right.
Cash levy or whatever. And then I know the only thing I know when Gary is back here for the budget stuff in August, I know he's ran into, and I, see it through the claims that come through and through the financial software, some of the increased repairs and maintenance costs on some of the equipment. So, yeah, I mean, I guess the mayor's point, we may just have to do a bigger equipment certificate in a certain year, potentially, and Gary's going to have to be the advocate for that. Does he need to replace, one piece of big equipment or one or two, over 2 or 3 years or whatever? And that's where we'll have to balance that. But I see you almost would set aside some of that money is what you're almost saying from that.
Well, if we're budgeting, again, if it's 150,000 now and we add to that in 2025, 50,000, now it's 200, in 26 it's 250, in 27 it's 300, in 28 it's 350. I mean, so it will continue to grow as long as
we stick to
we
that.
stick to that.
That would be the only thing, is because some years
Yeah.
it's always easy to almost.
But
or
that's
some to
that's
peel
why
off
I've
at
been
you.
preaching we have to do this.
Yeah. No, I think that's
So
fair. Yeah. So I'd say we'd for sure want to, I guess, maybe make sure that we up the CIP levy from 150 to 200.
Yeah, and
even
that's-
if we can,
right,
whether we
that's
set
what
aside
I
some
had.
this year, we have a higher baseline next year. So. I
And
think that's-
even if you added to your CIP budget or levy 60,000 for 2025, and you added to the roads, because I still think we need to add to the roads, you added to the roads 100,000, that is a total of 2%, or 2.5%. And so if you did everything here, eliminating the financial software, that's a 9% increase.
Correct. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, pretty much every.
So it's below the 10, which I think would be good if we can be
Yeah.
below a double digit. But
Yeah, I think so too.
I would agree.
So okay, so basically with that initial presentation, try to keep it around that.
yeah,
Nine-ish or
nine and a
whatever, yeah.
half, maybe. I
Okay.
mean, see where things come in. But to me, budgeting, 75 to 100,000 into financial software, it's almost like double dipping. So double. How do you say?
Okay. Yeah, I see
Yeah.
what you're saying. Yeah, it's. No, I think
keep
we can
wanting to move
strategize
this.
for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
It's horrible.
It's
Yeah.
online.
Yeah.
So
And there might
Are
be.
you proposing that we do the road levy yet then?
the road levy we'd add 100,000, so that would be, I think, for 20.
550?
No, we're actually levying 850 because it's 350 for the debt levy and then 450
Or the
for
800.
so 800. So then next year we would then add another 100, which would be 900.
Right, but for the actual roads levy, not the roads project from last year, like it would go from 450 to 550 on the
Yeah.
spreadsheet on page.
Right.
10.
Correct. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Correct. Brian was saying kind of flat, not increasing it, and I think we should continue to increase that.
Yeah, no, I
Be-
think that's fair. Yeah.
The other thing, we're going to have to look at is we've been talking about another bond in 25 or 26, probably not till 26, and so keep in mind, if you do another bond in 26, that's going to gobble up a lot of that 450, 500 too. So we have to keep that in mind as well. Maybe that bond isn't going to be until 27. We have to see how that. But I think if we just leave it, then we're not making headway, and we need to make headway in that.
Oh, I know that. I didn't want to go down as low as we did last year, so.
Yeah, and I think that was part of just the balance, but to get it to
Right.
the 12% we
Right.
landed at last year. Because I think that's even where we shaved off at the end was we had the rows, we knocked it down 50, 100,000 or whatever, so,
Right.
which I mean is fine. And I think we're doing, a decent amount, and it'll be nice to see once we balance up the 2023 projects, there may even be some dollars that we can maybe shift over to the current debt fund, as well as maybe even a little bit to our road maintenance fund, where our balance of like $1.5 million, and there now might be able to be 1.7, or higher, or something. So, which I think we're sitting a lot better than we were in the roads fund, several years ago or whatever. So, but I know there's more than enough to do out there too. So
Right, that's the thing,
that's
yeah.
and it doesn't get any cheaper. So, okay, so yeah, so I know, yeah, I guess that probably go into the top of page, or I suppose we covered, I guess, then the roads and then the CIP. So the one thing we'll probably, once we present the capital equipment plan in August, is we will have probably the opportunity to issue the bond later this year to cover the wells. We'll need to
Okay.
finance that,
Yeah.
as well as that the water main when Woodland Cove,
Right.
for 3/4 or
750,
Yep,
yeah.
yep.
Mhm.
So there might be an opportunity to tack on an equipment certificate maybe, this year, and then set aside some more money out of the cash levy for next. There's ways to
Right.
potentially
Yeah.
balance it between 25 and 26, or even,
Well, we're gonna
even
have,
the end of 20.
we
yeah.
may have to also float a bond in 25 for the treatment plant.
Correct, yeah.
So, and then we can see what interest rates are gonna do. If we don't have to float an equipment certificate this year, interest rates might be going down. They're talking about
Yeah,
it.
at least one rate cut by the end of this year, maybe more next year.
Yeah, so we can kind of keep tabs on that. But my comment on some of your taxes per capita comparison is,
Oh, sure.
okay. It seems like we're kind of cherry picking some of the cities, and I think what we should do is, if we're going to compare, we should compare the cities that like surround Minnetrista. Like, it should include St. Bonnie and Shorewood and Independence,
Oh.
and if you're going to include Long Lake, then you got to include Maple Plain, and other cities. I get Medina because they're very similar to us in terms of makeup, but Corcoran would be another good one to compare us to.
Yeah.
I just think it looks a little bit cherry-picked to me,
Oh.
but I'm not saying you
Oh.
did that
Oh.
intentionally, but.
No, yeah, I think if we included Shorewood, it
It-
wouldn't be much difference. To
Yeah.
me, I guess, I don't know what the council thinks, but I think, Orono, Mound, and Medina are three of our most comparables. I would
Right.
say it's never, well, I shouldn't maybe even make that commentary, but I don't think St. Bonnie, I think they're running into problems with their financials and
Yeah.
as far as, so I don't know how much benefit it shows to,
But the other thing, too, I wanted to point out is it's not a good comparison to do a per capita thing, because you don't pay your property taxes on a per capita basis. It's just a comparison, I get that, but.
Yeah. I still think, because I know some people like to look at the tax rate, but to
Right.
me, it's like, how much are you spending per
Per
your
person.
residence? I
Yeah.
think it's my personal
Yeah.
preference. Is a better, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
So, I know,
fair.
I think if we added in a couple of these other ones, I think we still would.
I think we
show-
would, but I
look
think it
pretty
would
well.
look like we're not trying to
Yeah.
cherry pick, but anyhow,
So-
just a
Oh,
comment.
that's fine, so, yeah, it's more just to at least set some of the, at least show
Yeah.
that I think we definitely aren't, I know when I started here in 06, 07, I think we were maybe more at the top of that rate.
What is our
rate.
tax rate now? Do you know? Is
It's
it,
under 20%, it's
Is
like
it like
19
19
and a
something?
half or something,
Mhm.
so even with that metric, I think we compare.
we
pretty
compare
well.
very
Yeah.
well.
I guess, to me,
if you compared us to Mound on the tax rate, we're
Yeah.
like way below them.
So no, and there,
So-
there's might be a couple others that are less than us, but I think it's pretty few and far between.
Yeah.
I guess, to me, this would be something I think that the council could be, I don't know whether it's be proud of, or if
Yeah.
anyone tries to say we're too high a tax city, I guess pretty quick you can come back and say, well, we can't control the county, we can't control the schools. What do you, if you look at it on a factual basis, and this is right from, they can go to the state auditor's office and look at it. I think it's something that everyone as council members can say that that's not a factual statement if they say their city taxes are too high, I guess, or so, but,
Okay,
I guess that's
Any
anything else.
comments, questions?
No. Let's move on to the next topic.
Next
my
one.
favorite.
Park dedication?
Oh,
Yeah.
are you taking that one, Mayor?
So at the, so this has come up a couple times, and I just thought, real quick, we'll give staff direction. The park dedication fee, I'm not, the Park Commission was, this has happened a couple of times when the subdivisions happen on parcels by the lake, for instance. So what happens is there's a percentage, but then it's capped at 25,000. So it's a percentage of the value of the lot, and then it's capped. And we're not, the Park Commission isn't saying we do the whole park dedication thing, not at all. They're just saying, should we look at that cap, because that cap was established like 20 years ago? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's been that way my whole time here.
Yeah, it's like 20 years ago, maybe even more. So they were just wondering if the council doesn't want to considering revisiting that cap, that portion of the ordinance, and maybe raising it to 35 or 40 or whatever. And we'd have to do some comparisons to see what other cities are doing.
Look into it.
Yeah,
Fine.
yeah.
All right. All right. The Nen Swamp.
Yes.
This is always the most interesting one.
Speaking of spending money, no.
Exactly.
So, the SWAMP program, the Stormwater Asset Management Program, the city has this program that provides scores of the stormwater ponds throughout the city, both public and private, as an indicator of stormwater ponds or best management practices that might need some attention. So the city has done a really good job as far as the public side of it. All of our public ones were A-OK. We're at a score that's higher than 65, which is kind of what we talked about being, hey, if it's 65, we should maybe take a look at it. So anything public, we're good on. The challenge comes that the majority of these assets in the city are privately owned and maintained. And so we've reached out and with some varied success as far as getting some information back. But it's just bringing it back to council for discussion on, what would the council like to see staff doing with the swamp scores as far as looking at some of these privately owned best management for BMPs in the city. So kind of set the stage as far as where we're at right now and where we might be going with regulatory agencies. So the next permitting cycle for the PCA comes up in 2025, so next year. And there have been rumblings that included in that next permit renewal will be some element of, hey, cities, you have to make an effort with regards to privately owned BMPs. Now, what that looks like, I don't know. But certainly, I think, talking to my colleagues, Minnetrista has certainly been doing that already. Now, we'll see what the permit language says when the time comes, so we can cross that bridge when we get there.
If I drive 100 miles west of here, would any of this pertain to any of the ponds out there?
I don't believe so, because it has to do with the size of the community.
I can't believe, unless I have this, I could have misunderstood this whole thing. But what you're telling me is you're going to have some sort of magic thing where you're going to tell people with private ponds that they have to do something and have another assessment on top of the roads that we already do.
Well, we're only talking about NERT ponds. Okay, so we're only talking about the stormwater runoff ponds that were created when a development was put in.
But if they're private,
They're
why are
owned by
we getting
HOA.
involved?
Well, because we are ultimately responsible. Ultimately, the city is responsible.
I think we can take
Yeah.
a step back to some extent with Minnetrista. I hear what you're saying with regards to these privately owned basins, and I didn't do the calculation ahead of time, but when we look at Minnetrista being a growing community, you've got a lot of stormwater ponds in Woodland Cove. That took up a few pages of the report for Woodland Cove in and of itself, and Hunter's Crest being the two bigger ones. And those are new enough that we have the documentation saying, hey, homeowners association, you're responsible for maintaining these. I think that there's also some outliers, some older developments that are maybe on the cusp of, is there an agreement in place or not? We'd have to do some digging to do that. We haven't done that broad brush for the city. So I think that my long answer to this is that I think that there are a lot of privately owned ponds that already have the documentation in place that, you know, you're responsible for this. Now, whether or not the HOA management company or the boards know of that, that's a good question. You know, and we can certainly, and we've been trying to have this as an education piece, certainly Hunter's Crest HOA.
They know.
They know,
about it.
and they've been
Yeah.
budgeting for it.
And
Woodland
Palmer
Cove.
Point knows too, and they've
Woodland
been
Cove knows.
asking, and
And
Woodland Cove knows. Yeah.
So I think I think that you know, hindsight being 20/20 with that question coming up, to state that, you know, for the council to know, like a lot of these ponds the HOAs know about. Now, are there some private ones where they don't know about it? I would be willing to bet yes. And so that's where we have a little bit, you know, if the MPCA permitting goes down that route and we are obligated to do some of that, and the swamp score is below that 65 threshold that we've set, then we might have a little bit more work coming out of us. But just knowing, you know, just knowing what the city's already done, and if this is coming through for the first time with this next permit go around, I don't know what that language is going to look like. I think that, like I said, what we're hearing is it'll probably be to make an effort.
I think that's already in place.
It could be. I don't know the permit inside and out. I've been relying on my colleagues to tell me.
It already says cities have to make an effort, and that's why we've been doing this.
Yeah, but I think what Allison's saying is the rumor is they're gonna actually crack
Enforce it.
down.
Oh.
And start, you know,
Yeah.
finding, I mean, thus far, there's been warnings.
Yeah,
And
okay.
we got audited one year, but rumblings are that they're gonna
Okay.
get more serious about it. And yes, we've done things, but likely it's not good enough, is what I'm gathering, is what I'm seeing. There are larger communities, where I live and such, where they're now taking an effort and actually doing maintenance, which also tells you something they haven't been
Yeah,
before.
right,
So
right.
now they are, Chanhassen, Eden Prairie,
Yeah.
you can see projects around the community where they're cleaning these out and doing them. So I think, to her point, everyone's nervous about what's coming.
Okay.
And
Well,
what you're saying is all HOA oriented?
Yeah, private ones, private and public,
And how
yeah.
much does that cost?
Yeah.
A lot. I
We
mean,
have-
it just depends
we have
on how much
about 9.
sediment's there, how to get in. There's a prominent corner in Chanhassen that was all trees and fences and landscaping that people just went and did over the years, and all that had to come out.
Wow.
Took it all out of there, cut all the trees down,
You're
got
kidding.
had excavators in there, cleaned it all out, regraded it. Right by Total Wine, behind the healthcare facility there in Chanhassen. It looks completely different, it had to, you know, but 25 years of nothing ever happening there, and they had to come in and do it, you know.
Well, I know from talking with Allison and Brian at Three Rivers, and of course being on the watershed district, that those ponds are really important. That they catch a lot of phosphorus from these developments. And you know, Brian told me 1 pound of phosphorus will turn into 500 pounds of algae in the lake, and so it's really important that those are maintained. And if they're not maintained, you know, everything's just running right through them, and the sediment and the phosphorus is going into the lakes or the rivers. So I think it's really important to get these up to reasonable levels, and I realize it is going to be expensive, but I think it's really needed for water quality.
So for that point, like the first one on here is the Jennings Cove one from 1987. It's got a score of 19. We don't know for sure if it is the HOA or not.
It isn't.
So
It isn't.
that would fall on us then so how much would that cost?
Well, so what initially, so that one I know isn't, because we've done work on that one in the past, and it was our responsibility, and so we've worked on that one in the past. So I'm like 95% certain
What
that,
made you say that? What made you say it's our responsibility?
because when so back in the 90s when they were subdividing, and Jennings Cove was done in the 90s, one of the ones that was done in the 90s, they didn't do an overlay, In other words, now what we do is, and David can explain it much better, but now what we do is when a development comes in, we do a taxing overlay district, so that if the HOA does not, and then we make it clear that those ponds are theirs, and if the HOA doesn't take care of it, we already have the authority and ability to go in and fix these ponds, and then we just tax those specific properties. So we started doing that in the early 2000s, I believe. So we didn't do that prior or before, and I know that there were some issues with the Jennings Cove stormwater pond, and that the city went in and tried to fix it or make it better. And so that's why I'm thinking that the Jennings Cove one is probably a city-owned one. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't go in and also do a taxing district. Maybe you could. That's something our attorney would have to, or they would have to figure out. But
Well, the Jennings Cove is, you're talking, the one in the park. It's in a city park.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that,
right.
this is,
Mhm.
this one's to the south, I believe. Yeah.
It-
We have a
it's
picture.
so there's the park, and then there's the pond. It's
Yeah.
right next door.
So this is on page 25, Mayor, of the packet.
Yeah,
Pond P84 is south of, it's between Cove Circle and Jennings Cove Road. Because we had documented the one that's in the park,
Mhm.
that was next to the 2022 street project.
This is the one in someone's backyard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Those are
So,
south.
yeah.
Okay.
The
So-
one in the park is ours, because
Uh-huh.
it's in the city park, and we
Right.
you're correct.
Yeah.
There's been a couple of occasions where they've gone out there and cleaned
Right,
that one out.
Right.
Yeah, down in between the two cul-de-sacs, isn't it, where you're talking, Alex?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, this new one.
Okay, so
Again,
it's
that
in-
I don't know, but you
Yes.
could probably do a special assessment for projects like that.
I mean, but if
You-
it's
you
in
can-
someone's backyard,
Well, it's probably an outlot.
There would be there'd be an easement over the top
Yeah.
of it, so that, there's two different processes. What Mayor's talking about, that we started in the early 2000s, is the stormwater taxing district with
Mhm.
any new subdivision. That's our
Mhm.
common practice. This one's before that time, and you can always do a 429 process to
Right.
assess for
Mhm.
these, and you'd have to, basically go around and do a water, a hydro water runoff map, if you will, to determine how many houses or how much of the water in this area goes to that
Goes to
pond.
that
So
pond.
then you can go to however many people that is,
Mhm.
10, 15 people, whatever it ends up being, and they would all then be part of that 429 process to do whatever you need to do to clean up that pond. So you just have to prove and demonstrate that, 10 people, their stormwater goes to that pond.
And the reason all of this is happening is because as we get built out more and more and more, these past ponds become more important.
They're all important.
They're all important. It's always been there. The requirements have always been there.
Yeah,
It just
okay.
hasn't been,
My
Well
comment to
maintained.
Jasper was today, I've learned a lot on the city council. Basically, when you go to buy a house, I don't know of any course that you take that says you're gonna be responsible for the roads, and we're gonna assess you for them, and you're gonna be responsible for the ponds, and we're gonna assess you for that. You don't take any courses, you don't know these expenses are coming. So, they're surprise expenses, and I'm trying to get away from surprise expenses.
Yeah, as David pointed out, the newer developments, it shouldn't be a surprise,
Shouldn't be a
because
surprise.
um,
That's
that-
why I'm
it still
asking.
is.
But-
I mean, it's part of it. When you go through closing and the stack of papers is like that, who goes through that and points all that out? It's in there.
Mhm.
If you read
Right.
through all that stuff.
That's in
there.
Oh, yeah.
oh yeah, the
Oh,
HOA
yeah.
covenants have it all in there and what everyone's responsible for and all that good fun stuff.
But in this case, because it was in the 80s, I highly doubt that anything was documented in terms of who's responsible. I mean,
It might surprise you more than you think.
Yeah.
That there had to have been some sort of stormwater maintenance agreement that went through as part of the subdivision agreement. There's an HOA.
So how do we find that?
Well, we'd have to,
Yeah.
we'd start here and then, but that's the
Yeah.
problem.
That's
with
the
process is you're gonna have to go back, for accuracy and do title searches, engage with a title company, or, Kennedy and Graven can do that too, but, you know,
Yeah.
it's gonna cost.
But
cost
here's,
money.
here's the thing, my experience has been, it all depends on who the planner was at the time. And seriously, I mean, you know, did they think about this at the time? Did they add it in?
Yeah, so, I mean, these are all good questions. So, you know, options, use certainly the storm tax district for everything that was platted after 2000. Some earlier subdivisions might have something in place. You know, there's the 429 assessment process that you can go through, similar to what we do for street improvement projects. There is, I looked up the statute last week when I was drafting this report, and there is, under the guidelines of what you can assess for projects, it's for stormwater maintenance. I'm not saying it verbatim, which, you know, I would work with, if that's something the city council wants to explore, I would work with the city attorney's office to make sure that they would be comfortable with that mechanism and how that process would work. But a 429 assessment process is an option. And then certainly the stormwater management fund is a city funding source that could be used. And you know, if you want to take a look at pulling from that fund versus doing assessments, then we would have to work with Brian and his crew to start getting budgets put together for that.
The problem you're going to run into some of these older ponds with the larger lots too. If you know, back then they had larger lots. You have fewer people to assess, and if it's going to be, let's just say, a $600,000 project, and there's 10 homes or 15 homes, you can't assess that whole amount. It's just not financially viable. So I think we have to figure out how much it's going to cost and how it's going to be paid for. But I would say to start with probably letters to the homeowners in this area, you know, would be at least a start, so they're not totally shocked. Just saying we're starting to explore this. Your pond, I don't know, some kind of a explanation and an education letter, and the city is looking at different financing options. I don't know what to say in the letter exactly, but I agree with Han to just pop something up and say, okay, now you guys are going to owe 20 grand. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's just, I'm not real interested in doing that. But I think we have to let them know that this is coming, and they're going to have some.
And like so Jennings Cove has an HOA.
Maybe.
I believe so. I think they do,
I mean,
yeah.
did they come out when we did the park and talked about the curb and all that stuff?
Yeah.
They had someone here for one of our
Yes.
meetings.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
do. I don't recall if it goes because that southern area was developed after Jennings Cove.
Okay.
I don't remember. I want to say it's like 7 or 8 years later. So I don't know if they're part of the Jennings Cove HOA that we've worked with in the past.
Although we must have a contact
Right.
for
and-
the Jennings Cove HOA, and we could ask if that's
Yeah,
part of it.
and that's like we can start getting answers to our questions, the challenges. The amount of time that it takes to do that, particularly if you have to do title searches, as David mentioned.
Well, staff, what are you guys recommending? What the first step should be then?
Well, certainly this is why we brought it to the council's attention. We can certainly stay the course and just monitor. If you look at how these scores are adjusting, you know, every 2 years we're seeing a delta of, you know, a couple points depending on how big the pond is. So it's not like we're seeing a huge flood of, no pun intended, of ponds coming at that 65 score.
That's before the month of rain.
Right.
Yeah. No, but what I'm saying is, what would your first, what are you thinking of doing? We can't just keep sitting
Yeah.
here, because we've done that for a couple of years now.
Okay. Well, is one of the things that I think might be helpful for the council and for staff, to be very honest with you, is to go and if we have the storm tax district being set up in 2000, would be to go and take a look at, okay, what ponds out of that whole list that we've generated, how many of those ponds were built 2000 or later? right? And so start paring down and
Okay.
saying, all right,
Okay.
now we're dealing with a much more manageable data set, in my opinion. Because those are the ones that are going to be the surprise, right? The 2000 and later, if you didn't read your closing documents, I'm sorry, but that's
So
another.
you're saying prior to 2000?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm. Right,
So maybe that's something that we can bring back to the council.
right.
So I think if we start looking at that, I think the other thing to take a look at is the program is based on how the scores are developed as they look at the area draining to the pond and what the land use is around it. And based on that, you use the industry standard of how many
Right.
pounds or how much sediment's going in there. So is that really what happened? Did they get that much sediment in there? Is there more? Is there less? So, because the next step of that is getting that bathymetric survey
Mhm.
and find out, is this actually what, is it actually filling in like we thought it was?
And I think we need that, because I would hate to send people letters saying, oh, you might be assessed, and then finding out, oh, wait,
Right.
it's not
It's
as
not.
bad
False
as we
alarm.
thought. You know what I'm
Yeah, I
saying?
think
Yeah.
we
You
should
know,
do that
so I
first.
think we need to,
Okay.
like
Well,
you
I mean,
said,
there's-
earlier than 2000, get a list of those, and then do the bathymetric assessments. Then we know
Yeah.
more.
See, I mean, on this list, there's not that many that are older than 2000.
No.
And they tend to be bigger areas too,
Right.
so
Yeah.
they could probably support a
And like
you know,
the
wider
Trillion
number.
Bay one, they have an HOA. So
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
whether, I mean, send the HOA an email on these ones and be like, hey, this is your pond score at this time. We're going to be doing this survey. Here's
Didn't we
what could
send
happen pending
letters
it.
a few
Yeah,
years
yeah, we did it
back?
2 years ago.
Yeah,
So what
we've
kind of
done-
feedback did we get? Not much?
Not much.
Okay. Sorry.
Because it's one of those things where if you're not required to,
Yeah.
will you? And it's, or maybe it was a lack of understanding, or maybe it didn't get in the right person's hands. I don't know. I think that there's, certainly there's some more steps that we can take, particularly if we have good contact information for some of these HOAs. Like,
Well, did you have a dollar amount in there as to what it was gonna cost to have the excavation? Because that'll get people's attention, the dollar amount.
we didn't do,
You're just warning them that this could happen.
Yeah.
They'll have no idea. I mean, I wouldn't know that you were gonna charge a lot of money.
well,
Well,
yeah,
Are
right.
these bad?
Bathymetric
Bathymetric. How much are
surveys, so I updated that number. It's in the packet. It was
800.
Like 800 too.
15.
And that's just based on pond size, or is that like the base fee and then there's more stuff tacked on pending?
I
What
would s-
happens?
I would say a bathymetric survey, that's why we have that range in there, is based on the size of the pond. So that would be a pretty solid number, regardless of size, between 800 and 1500.
Yeah, because you don't have to do the
'Cause you-
whole pond.
Right.
Yeah.
So the cost per square yard to remove, now that's the wild card, right? Because it's not only how much sediment are you moving, that would be an easy number to calculate based on that survey. But what's the level of contamination? How are they going to have to dispose of it? But even going back before that, to David's point, when you start looking at some of these, how, can they get in there?
Mhm.
What kind of equipment, can they get the standard equipment in there? Or are they looking at getting smaller equipment? Are they looking at significant tree removal, removal of landscaping and patios and who knows what's in there?
Mm-hmm.
That's the eyebrow raise that I'm seeing,
Yes, it is.
Well, you can see
Yeah.
it right there.
Yeah,
That's the pond.
I know,
Mhm.
I know.
And these are trees, all houses, that's not right to the road. That's gonna be major,
Yeah.
And-
There are a lot of
to get
angry
in there and
residents.
what
Well, you would access it from that other side,
Yeah,
From Jennings
from
Cove Road there.
the other road there.
and I'm not familiar
There's
with the
more
grades
trees
through
over
there.
I know.
You're gonna cut more down, so, yeah.
And I think the other thing too is we want to be a little bit strategic on this if we're looking at the PCA coming through with a permit renewal and having the city council, and it's a year away. It's important work to do. But if we're seeing major, well, I shouldn't say major, but challenges with some of these, that do we want to start thinking, all right, well, let's do a plan so that we can, we'll demonstrate to the PCA that we are making an effort. but do we really want to cut our teeth on a really hard one? or should we find one that we know is in an open area?
I like
and
that
is flat,
idea.
you know
I like
what
that
mean?
idea.
Low-hanging fruit.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Like I think it's like that could really be a hornet's nest, and we don't want to upset residents like that.
The thing is to Peter's point, depending on, so Jennings Bay is one of the most degraded bays on Lake Minnetonka. We know that it's, I think, a D, maybe even an F. And so it's kind of depends on where your stormwater ponds are and where they outlet to. That's also going to kind of determine somewhat where you should be looking, because the impact that they have could be significant, especially if it's a degraded bay already. You know, so I don't know. I mean, there's all these. Plus, the other thing is, when you fix these ponds, could there be grants available? Because if they're working on TMDL or something on Jennings Bay, and you know that might be something to talk to MCWD about, because if they have to, and I know that we're on the hook for phosphorus reduction. If there's a TMDL and it says, 36 pounds have to be removed, blah, 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 you're on the hook for 15 of those pounds, whatever, then we have to do something, but there may be grants available. I don't know. So that might be something we should ask at least.
To my knowledge, for something that you're required to do with the watershed
Yeah.
district, there aren't. We've done the ravine grant with them. That's something above and beyond the Minneapolis
Right.
ravine. We restored that. We got a little bit of money
Mhm.
from them, but
And Bowser doesn't
this
have
has
any?
been brought up before. And when it's a regulatory authority that you already have as a city, they don't look too keen to giving you money for something that you're supposed to be doing already.
Yeah, but why not? I don't know. I'm just throwing out some thoughts.
Okay, so of the ones that are on page 13 that are less than 65, which ones are the easiest to tackle?
Probably some of the ones in Hunter's Crest. Palmer Point would be easy to access. Theirs is right on, right next to the road.
I wonder if there's, I should, no, unfortunately Gary's not here this evening, but some of these HOAs, there could be some relationship between staff and members of the HOA, and maybe it's worth reaching out to some of those and just, instead of just sending off a letter to somebody who we don't know
Right.
who's
Mhm.
responsible, is taking that more personal approach and saying, hey, we've got this data set that's kind of telling us this pond might be due for some maintenance. Has anything been done? And just kind of start those conversations with, versus just sending out a letter that may or may not get into the.
Yeah, I was thinking if we're not sure if it's an HOA or, but yeah, okay. And I know Hunter's Crest HOA is aware of their ponds and that they have to address those. So maybe the Hunter's Crest and even Palmer Point, the first one, P13 and P69, might be two that we could
Right, and
kind of
I
look
think
at first.
I think too, like I had a strong connection with some of them from the Hunter's Crest HOA, and when I asked, because I knew they were doing some work for it, they had programmed it into their
Right.
budget, and when I asked for the documentation, like just can you tell me how many loads they called out, I didn't get anything back, so I'll try that again.
Yeah,
So just things like that, this might not fall high on their priority list, so I'll make note of that too. There's some additional information that I can bring back to the council as far as paring down what's been built before 2000 and then trying to find that personal connection with the HOA.
I don't think there's a lot that was built prior to 2000. Jennings Cove, maybe, trying to think of other ones that were built prior. I mean, they're around the lake, the developments over there. But
Well, we have some good things to work on,
Yeah.
I think. You know, I like that we've started talking about this for the last 4 years. I think we've been talking about this, and getting some cadence so that, you know, understanding that we're likely going to see something in that next permitting cycle, at least we have some groundwork that we can build off of.
Mm-hmm.
With the permitting cycle, and I know like we set the score as 65, is that good, or are they gonna come back and say like it's gotta be 80?
So,
Like,
Well, that's a good question, because the program that we use isn't used metro-wide. I don't know what other programs are available to do something like that. So it'll be interesting to see how they phrase that. If they're gonna go by year built, anything that's 20 years old or 30 years old, I don't know I don't know what they're looking at for draft language. But yeah, we set it at 65, thinking that would be probably a, you know,
good level.
place to start at.
Well, the ones that we're talking about are even far lower than
Yeah.
65, so,
Okay.
yeah. All right, so do you kind of know what you
I'm making notes so that, so in no order of importance, I had to find a list of BMPs that were built before 2000 so that we can see which ones don't have that storm tax district. And then to look for personal connections to HOAs so that on that list, if we can go and find that, you know, instead of sending that letter out into who knows where. Prioritizing basins based on the condition of the downstream body, with Jennings Bay being one of the examples. And then there was, and then I think maybe once I bring that information back to council, there was a discussion about getting some bathymetric surveys done and looking for grants, if there's any grant money available for any of this preliminary work.
Okay.
Okay. When would council like to see this come back for discussion?
When would,
I don't know how long it's gonna take you to find
I
that stuff.
I was just gonna say,
True, that's a good point.
that's what I was gonna say, well, when do you think you can come back for your
Well,
information?
I'd like to give it a good try to get some of this, and you know, the connections with the HOAs, which I'm maybe fall. That's a nice like
Let's see,
3-month window.
September? The September meeting?
September?
September. Okay.
How dire is this? I know it got referenced earlier that they're starting, I think David talked about like bigger communities like
Right.
Chan and stuff. I mean, are we in the next threshold, like we should be doing something by 2027 or 2030 or what? Do you have any idea or not really? Is it just,
No.
I'm just
It-
curious.
If
So
they
this
ask, just give them all the numbers for the Woodland Cove new ones and say, we haven't identified the old ones
I
yet.
don't know, I guess it's-
Yeah. Well, that's like you could play. It depends on how the language is set up, right? Are they just looking for the city making an effort, or are they looking for the city to go and implement, to go and?
Well, let me make a comment here, just so you know. It costs a whole lot more to clean up a body of water than it does to prevent it from getting polluted in the first place. So, and that's what these stormwater ponds are supposed to do, preventative, okay? So I don't really think it's in our long-term best interest to postpone this, because then we're going to be on the hook, because they're going to be doing, they've probably already done TMDLs for all of the bays and the whole MCWD watershed. And what happens is then we're on the hook to help with the cleanup of these bays and reduce the phosphorus loading. So it's in our best interest to do this before it gets so bad. So
Right, but some of these are already bad.
they are,
I mean,
they
some
are,
of these bays are
right. And
already-
so we're really going to be on the hook one way
Yeah.
or the other to clean up to help reduce the phosphorus loading anyway. So this isn't something that you can just say, well, postponing, we have to, we can't do this all at once because of the cost, but we need to be addressing it sooner than later.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right.
Just one more thing.
Yeah.
Would it sense to do the bathymetric survey on like the 8 of them that are under 60 just now, so we have it when we reach out to the HOA if we find them, so they have the information?
I think what I'd like to do is see if I can find that personal connection and say, hey, so you've got these ponds on, and have the conversation, because it's so difficult to go just with a letter, and have a phone conversation or an in-person meeting, explain what we're doing, ask, because if they've done some kind of maintenance on those, oh, that's great. Okay, well, how much do you think you removed? And then we can update it, and their score might go up. So I think that would be an important thing to do first. And then, like I said, if we look at kind of culling that list based on what's under a taxing district, and if I get anywhere with these personal connections, we'd have a smaller list that we'd be looking at to get those bathymetric surveys done as a next step.
Okay. All right. All right. So real quick, so Kathleen, myself, Gary, Jasper, Aaron Vollmer, and then and also from Kennedy and Graven, an attorney, Stroman was there, and it was a virtual meeting, and we talked about a different process that cities can do for the water treatment plant, and I think at the end, kind of to make a long story short, I think all of us kind of agreed that that's not the process we want to go through. It's kind of it's what you do. The process is you hire a contractor, a general contractor, early on. So like right now, and then they're involved in the process, and then they go out and they get bids. So once the HVAC system has been designed, they take it to subcontractors, and they get bids. And then once the electrical has been done, and then they come back to council, and council approves every phase of the project. So maybe the grading phase is the first thing, then they do the foundation, and then they do this and they do that. We talked about this for an hour, and we really came to the conclusion that it really isn't going to save us any time, especially right now, because first of all, we'd have to go out for RFPs. That means request for proposals, and then they'd have to submit their proposals, very similar to like what we did with AE2S. And then you go through the proposals, and then they have to be qualified, and so on and so forth, and then you have to interview them. So by the time we did all that, we'd be well into September anyway. I mean, at least, based on our experience with hiring AE2S. So, and then we said, well, we didn't quite see the value in this either, because they were trying to sell us on it's a good value, because they can be involved early on in the design process. And we're like, let's see, that's not going to happen, because we're already going down that path right now. So they wouldn't be involved. So long story short, if anybody should ask, we did look at it, we evaluated it, and it really was a unanimous consensus that it doesn't do us in this project a lot of good. Having said that, the other reason I think I would be very apprehensive about it is because it's such a big project. If we're going to do something like this, and it's, let's say, first time doing this, I would highly recommend we do it on a much smaller project. So maybe we could consider doing it, let's say down the road we have to add another storage facility, water tower in ground, up above, whatever. For a couple $1 million, maybe that's where we want to think about it, and think about it earlier on. Because I think we're too far down the road right now.
Yeah, it definitely just seemed like it would cost more and drag it out longer to go this route.
But the other thing that kind of came to light is I think the council, maybe with engineering, we need to establish a budget. We need to tell them this is where we want to be, and you need to try and work within those parameters. Otherwise, we might get a budget that we can't handle. So there might be some certain things that they can do cost savings wise, and say, well, okay, if this is your budget, we're going to have to do this. Or if this is your budget, we're going to have to do this. But I think it would be in the city's best interest to really make it clear what we think or what we expect this project to come in at. Now, what that number is, I don't know. But
Well, I think, the 19 number shot me, the 19 million, that's where, I think multiple of us pushed back and said that seems a little high,
Well,
or whatever,
we found out in that meeting, so what happens is when they start designing this, they start out with a 30% contingency. And so that's why it's 19 million right now. But then you get into the design process, and by the time it's 50 or 60% design, now you're probably down to 20% contingency. And then by the time it's a final design, now you're down to maybe a 5 or 10% contingency. So that's why I think the 19 million is such a sticker shock, and Brian's going, we can do it for less than this. So it's probably going to come in between 14 and 15, but I think we need to make it clear, we, as a small community, or a small amount of water users, we need to be very, very conscientious about this budget. And so I think we need to convey that this evening to them, 14 million if possible. Let's not put any bells and whistles on this thing. This is strictly utilitarian, whatever we need to do. I don't care if it's ugly, we'll cover it with trees. I mean,
I care a little bit if it's ugly.
no, we'll cover it with trees. But I mean, we can't go overboard just because we don't have the money.
We can size it, and then I know you can expand with the weird. I mean, I know there's things you can do that we maybe just got to talk to them about as far as what's the right size. I know obviously Gary wants it as big as possible, but to the what's the budget going to fit,
Right.
and all those things got to be considered. I guess
Right.
that's
Yeah.
council
So-
needs to do.
And then, Aaron won't be here tonight, but I guess I don't know
I
his
think
name.
it's like the Grant
CEO,
Meyer. I
Grant,
think it's like their
Grant Meyer,
CEO.
mhm. So he'll be here, so we'll be able to ask him a lot of questions. So, all right. With that, we can be adjourned if there's a motion.
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Kathleen. Thank you, Peter. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes.